Uhuru, brothers and sisters and comrades. I just wanted to talk a bit this morning about this real interesting kind of expose of the United States with what is happening in these border cities where Mexican and other families who are attempting to enter into the United States have been captured. And once captured, attempting to come into the United States, their families have been separated, children, some as young as 3, separated from their parents. We've seen images of them thrown into cages and where children are screaming desperately for their parents. And this has caused some outrage in many quarters. But I think that more than anything, what it really reveals to people who want to ignore it is what a horrible institution this thing that's called the United States really is. It is a serious blot on humanity. And I'm saying this, and I want, while I'm saying this, I recognize that Facebook is going to take this off or make it impossible for us to boost it if we get anything up, but we're trying to use other platforms as well. Obviously, we will not be able to rely on social media platforms much longer, if at all, anymore, for getting our messages out. This is not just the African People's Socialist Party, but I'm talking about anybody who's trying to do anything meaningful and speak truth to peoples anywhere. These platforms are not going to serve us, and we're going to have to find other ways to deal with that. But I do want to say that it is important to recognize what is happening. And to look at what's happening at the borders is just one example. And I want to say that we have real, that is to say, the African People's Socialist Party, the entire Uhuru movement. We have absolute total solidarity with the Mexican and other peoples who are colonized south of the border, who are attempting to come to this country, fleeing the circumstances that have been imposed on them by U.S. government, corporate policies and actions, and running to the United States to, whether they know it or not, try to capture some of the value, some of the resources that have been stolen from their countries south of the border and brought here. So that we've had a history of United Fruits and various other kinds of institutions like that who have been responsible for overthrowing governments. In fact, they used to refer to the South America as the backyard of the United States and banana republics. That's where it comes from, because of the influence of corporations like United Fruit that at any given time would overthrow governments in order to suck the people dry, suck their resources dry, and to bring them to the United States where they would be traded all over the world to the benefit of the United States, white people, white power, etc. So those people who are coming across those borders, I think it's really important for us to say with absolute, without any reservation at all, that we have absolute total solidarity with their right to cross that artificially imposed border to come to this territory. And then I want to say that when we look at this question, we recognize that what they are now calling the United States is stolen territory. That if there is an immigrant question, an immigrant problem, and the U.S., even the liberals who attempt to denounce Donald Trump for the separation of families policies that seems to be at work now, the fact is that if there is an immigration problem, it is not the absence of some constructed immigration policy, liberal immigration policy, bipartisan immigration policy that would be put forth by the Democrats and the Republicans, the liberals or the conservatives or reactionary. The immigrant problem in the United States is white people. White people who came to this land uninvited by anybody, stole all the lands, and now we have people who are living in concentration camps called Indian reservations that they were put there by white people. We're talking about white people who stole half of Mexico, and then erected a border there that would separate the Mexican people from each other and from their resources, from their territories. And they want to talk about now the issue of separation of families. I think that we're not talking about Trump here, and we must really understand that, and that to allow this discussion to be something that's framed as Democrats versus Republicans and Trump versus the nice white people is ridiculous. And the history, I've looked at television and I've seen these pitiful, these mournful liberals or white people who are talking about Democrats mostly, but also others. We've seen things like the Pope of all people, who is only time he is concerned is if they run out of sufficient amount of KY jelly when they are molesting children. I mean, you're talking about the Pope, separation of families, when the Pope is the one that signed the edict that separated Spain and Portugal in terms of who could be legally involved in the slave trade. Yes. And the Pope is bemoaning the fact that children are being separated from their families. How many children did the Pope, the Catholic Church, steal from Africans and other people as a part of the whole process of colonizing the world that the Catholic Church, the Pope, was also involved in? And then there is the Prime Minister of England, of all places, who also is talking about how they don't like what is happening with the children and separating families, that we don't do that in England. What are you talking about? I mean, England at one time that controlled a quarter of the world's population, a quarter of the world's territory, that was responsible in large measure for the slave trade, that has committed and continues to commit horrible offenses against the people, even up to this, the war on the Falkland Islands. You remember that? How the Falkland Island could be a part of England, etc. And so you have these liberals who are saying, Trump has really done it now. He's really overstepped his boundaries. He's going to really be in trouble now because this is not the American way, and Americans will not tolerate what Trump is. Are you joking? Who are you talking to? Don't you understand that Africans hear you when you say that? Yes. Don't you understand that Mexicans and other oppressed people hear you when you say that? Yes. Don't you understand that we've seen Democrats, Republicans, and even before there were Democrats and Republicans, white people who committed the worst kinds of offenses against us? They have skinned us alive. They have cut open the bellies of pregnant so-called Indians and African women and played ball, soccer and what have you with the unborn children. Yes. This is America that we are talking about. Don't tell us anything about the American way. Yes. And what is happening, of course, is this discussion is being framed in a fashion that is supposed to be one that is between the Democrats and Republicans, because they don't want you African, they don't want you Mexican, they don't want you oppressed person to step outside of that framework and look for your freedom where you have to find it. And your freedom is not going to be found within the Democrat or Republican parties. It's not going to be found within the existing American social system. It's going to be found as a consequence of attacking that system that has been responsible for separating families historically. How many families were separated as a consequence of the slave trade? How many black people died coming across the Atlantic Ocean in those ships? How many people were thrown? How many young people went to get water from the river and then didn't show back up to their villages because they had been captured by white slavers? Don't talk to us about the separation of children and how somehow it's a Trump problem. It's an American imperialism problem. White power was born through separating families, through separating children from their parents, etc. How many black children were sold away from their parents, sold down south and up south and things like that as a part of the whole process of building American wealth? The whole republic rests upon the graves and the families that were torn asunder as a consequence of slavery, as a consequence of the brigandage of the white world, and including the United States of America. So what we want to say is that you can't fool us, and we're not going to be locked in this process of crying over the children who were kidnapped and thrown into cages in the United States. You've been throwing people into cages forever. There have even been places in Belgium and other places in Europe where African people were brought, enslaved by colonial powers and brought and put behind glass bars in zoo-like situations so that white people can come and watch them. talk to us about this? You're talking about rapists, child molesters, presidents like Thomas Jefferson, and then the others who don't get spoken of, like George Washington, who I'm told died because he caught a cold or some kind of problem as a consequence, leaving the slave quarters where he went to rape an African woman and in the rain. Don't talk to us about this. We understand who America is and what America is, and increasingly peoples around the world and black people are waking up and we're striking out. We want to have our own freedom, our own government, our own Africa. We want to move white people from Africa, etc. We want imperialism gone. You talk to us about separation of families when a group of white people could get together in 1884 and 1885 in Berlin, Germany, far from Africa, and carve up Africa into these untenable entities now. How many families were separated as a consequence of those artificial borders that was created then? And then the liberals tell us this is not the American way, what Trump is doing on the border. You must be joking. You must think that everybody is crazy. No, it doesn't make a difference if you're a Republican or a Democrat, if you're a liberal or conservative. Conservative, if you're a fascist or a Democrat, the fact of the matter is that colonialism is colonialism, and the whole white world has laid prostrate at the feet of imperial white power, and we're not going to take it anymore. That's why we're calling on people to join with us in October. To come to the 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party, which is going to be the most important event that happens for Africa and the world, where black people from all over will be coming together to set our own path. So our own freedom, to take back our own Africa and everything that has been stolen from Africa, whether it's on the continent of Africa or whether it's in New Jersey. We want it all back. And that's what we're going to be coming together to deal with. So we have no illusions about the American way. We know that the American way is represented in exactly what Trump is doing. And in fact, Trump is nicer in some ways. We're not ignorant of what Obama has done in this process and how many, and I want to say something about that sellout Negro. And you have to get upset about it if you want to, but Obama was responsible for more people being kicked out of this country than any previous president. Obama is the one who double-crossed you and told white people that they didn't owe reparations for black people. Obama is the one who only had anything positive. He never had anything positive to say about you. He talked about your mama. He talked about your dad. He talked about how we didn't have good parents and that's why we were catching hell in America. He went to Africa and did the same kind of thing. So it's been Democrats, it's been Republicans, it's been a history of American imperialism that has wreaked havoc with our lives, and we will only know a decent future when we strike out and find it for ourselves. We live in communities throughout America today, some of us, where we see this whole process of pushing us out of our communities that they call gentrification. Well, entire communities are being disappeared, where families who grew up in one place can't even go back 15, 20 years later to find the place where they grew up, can't find the churches where their parents were married in, can't find the schools that their parents attended because they're gone. They've been buried under this gentrification process that's removed black people from where we once thought we had some kind of security. Our security is in total, absolute liberation. Our security is in the total liberation and unification of Africa and the African people around the world under the leadership of the African working class, under the leadership of the advanced detachment of the African nation, that is the African People's Socialist Party. So there is no Donald Trump problem. Our problem is America, and our problem has been here as long as America has forced it upon us at gunpoint. We remember that we didn't come here voluntarily. It's not like we knew 400 or 500 years ago that there was going to be an NBA where they needed somebody who could dribble a ball and jump real high and then said, let's get there early so that we can get a fast break on it. No. We were kidnapped. We were brought here against our will at gunpoint, and we tried to do everything we could, live according to every rule that the white man has put there for us. It made it illegal for us to escape. When we escaped, captured us, put us in jail, hanged us like they did Nat Turner. We've tried to stay in church, like the white man said, go to the crackers church, and everything's going to be all right. When we go to church, they come to church, they blow it up, or they kill us when we are there. They said you can vote your way out of here, and then they give us the so-called right to vote, and then when you vote, you end up voting for nobody because they gentrify you. They create all kinds of situations where they change the borders and things like that, so your vote doesn't mean anything, and then they pick the Negroes who you can vote for, so that you're always voting for them no matter what you think you're doing. I want to criticize all the Negroes. I want to criticize those Negroes in Africa who allow, the white man is the only person that can come to Africa. They don't need visas. White people don't need visas. There's no immigration problem for white people. They go all over Africa without visas. You can't get an African into this country unless it's a sellout or somebody from the African petty bourgeoisie, got big money, or they know white people with big money. They can't even come into the country. And yet these lick spittles call themselves presidents and prime ministers and big shots in Africa and lord it over our people in Africa. They never complain about it. They never criticize that. You got Negro politicians, people who are in office holders. You don't hear a single one of them talking about the treatment of black people and the fact that black people can't come here from Africa. You don't hear a single one of them protesting the gentrification that's happening in our community and what have you, or calling on black people to strike out on our own, to build for ourselves so that we're not dependent on white power. So the reality is that we're not looking at a Trump problem, we're looking at an American problem, and we're looking at a problem of us having not come together organized to build our own capacity to take care of ourselves. Come to the 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party. It's going to be in St. Louis, and that's going to be October 6th through the 12th. And we look forward to seeing you there. That's the way forward. And we will work at ending this immigration problem by turning Africans into a free people who are no longer immigrants, and fixing it so that white people can go back where they came from. I think the real response to the immigrant question is white man, go home. White man, go home. All over the world, white man, go home. Thank you.